So listen carefully about the negative aspects of the GATT treaty, and this was put out across mainstream news in amongst the trivia and the sports and the Hollywood affairs and all that nonsense.
The hope at the time was to have you both together, and then we could really hear the back and forth and not listen to us. I had to raise some of the questions myself I'm confident you would have raised. Let's have what opening comments you have and then the questions from the members.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me back. Firstly, I want to make clear, I think you know, Mr. Chairman, that I was in business. I believe in free markets. I believe in free enterprise. And I believe the purpose of the economy is not just to improve indices, but to improve the state of the nation. Yours, mine. So, I'm not an anti-free market man, nor an anti-free enterprise man. Quite the contrary. Felix, as you saw, is an old friend of mine. In fact, he's been my banker on and off for the past 20 years or more. But I'm in total disagreement with him. What you've heard today is the view from big business, of which I was part. And I believe the view from society in general is totally different. I believe it to be so different that I came out of retirement to start a political party in Europe, to become chairman of one of the 9 parliamentary groups in the European Parliament, to fight against what I believe to be one of the most destructive issues, proposals ever put before your assembly or any other assembly. In fact, I was watching television last night and I saw Senator Moynihan, and he said, he was there, was Representative Newt Gingrich, and the words he used were probably the most important vote of the decade. Could hardly be more important. Now, I'd like, if I may, to comment on some of the points that my friend Felix made. When talking about the loss of manufacturing jobs, all the figures you gave, he put that down largely to productivity. But in the last few months, we've seen Boeing, IBM, Advanced Microsystems, as well as joining all the other companies like Hewlett-Packard, going offshore to get cheap labor. That's nothing to do with productivity, Mr. Chairman. That's moving to get the cheap labor 40 times cheaper. And please don't think this is unskilled jobs. These are skilled jobs. These are high-tech jobs going there. Of course, there are also the unskilled jobs, but the skilled ones are going to highly skilled people, and they are moving offshore. And if you think that's productivity, then I think you would be wrong. Of course, there's an increase in productivity, and of course, that puts pressure on the job market. But why accentuate that pressure manifold at the very time when you've got the pressure? By encouraging, by creating a system that forces people to go offshore. I'd also remind you that not only are jobs being lost, but I'd confirm the figures that we all know. It was not a marginal drop in earnings that global free trade has brought in the United States. In the United States, before NAFTA has its effect, and before GATT, which is so much bigger than NAFTA, has its effect, your hourly wages, according to the Labor Department statistics, are 13.4% down in the last 20 years, and your weekly ones are 19.2% down. Then Felix also mentioned how competitive the states have become. Well, surely the measure of competitiveness is the balance of trade. And as you, Senator, pointed out, if you have the second worst balance of trade in history, $150 billion, that's not being competitive in world markets. Then there was the question of foreign investment. There was the question of the words we used, attracting foreign investment in the United States. This apparent inflow of foreign investment. Well, as businessmen and you as policymakers obviously have to take both sides of the equation into account. There's a massive foreign outflow of investment. Net. Take foreign inflow, take foreign outflow, the balance is negative. And then we heard Felix's testimony on the trillions of dollars, his words, that now move around in the global economy. He rightly said the global financial marketplace was totally integrated. In his testimony, he talks about $500 billion to be invested in China. And then what does he say? He says what America needs, and no doubt this is true about Europe as well, is an increased rate of savings. What for? To invest in China? To invest among those trillions that have to go out? Why do you need them? You need them right here. Just like we need them right where we are. We can't afford a hemorrhage. We can't increase our rates of savings just to invest them elsewhere, and where we bleed to death in terms of capital, and we bleed to death in terms of jobs. And this is the big point, Mr. Chairman. What we are witnessing is the divorce of the interests of the major corporations and the interests of society as a whole. It used to be said that what was good for General Motors, and we all believed it, probably was true, was good for the United States. That is no longer true. The transnational corporations, Mr. Chairman, I've just brought some figures, came out recently. They now have $4.8 trillion per annum in sales. They account for 1/3 of global output. The largest 100 account for 1/3 of all foreign direct investment. Now, where do you think the bulk of that investment is going? It's going where it earns the most. There's no other way it can go. What chief executive can invest otherwise, Mr. Chairman? So, if, as you've heard today, you have freedom of movement of capital, freedom of movement of technology, and you can employ people for 40 or 50 times cheaper who are skilled, and you can import their products back anywhere in the world, that's the basis of global free trade. How can those investments, how can these transnational companies who have $4.8 trillion of sales invest anywhere other than where it's cheapest and where their return is greatest? Because if they don't, the system that you and your colleagues would be voting for if you pass it forces them to do it, otherwise they go bankrupt. So we have a system for the moment being proposed. You here, we in Europe. It's the same system with the same effects on us, which will result in massive unemployment, massive hemorrhaging of jobs and capital, but which will increase corporate profits. And it is believed by economists that you can measure the health of an economy by the size of corporate profits. Now, I am for corporate profits. All my business life, I've worked to increase our profitability. But I believe that when you get to a system whereby, so as to get the best corporate profits, you have to leave your own country. You have to say to your own sales force, goodbye, we can't use you anymore. You're too expensive. You've got unions. You want holidays. You want protection. So we're going offshore. And you destroy your own nation. I think that's short-term thinking. That's the real short-term investment. Because that is like making a profit on the deck of a Titanic, playing cards in as clever as opposed to wise way. In Europe, we have less flexibility than you have here in the States. So rather than take a big hit these reduction in wages before your recent actions. Before NAFTA, before GATT, these big hits on wages. We in Europe tried to protect wages,